Publication is so important, it gets its own quadrant. And the reason for that is because the whole point of the research enterprise is to generate new knowledge and then disseminate it. I think Stephen put it so beautifully that I had to write it down. It said, truth comes from the accumulation of knowledge over time. So my previous session on grant proposal writing emphasized the competitive aspect. And competing's okay. I've had some success at the competition, but what I really like is the collaboration and the cooperation. So when you publish, when a study that you worked on gets published, that expands your team science from your lab or your clinic to the entire research community. So what I want to say about writing, the general comments will apply to any kind of text that you draft. I'm going to pull this down because I can't see you and I can't see the PowerPoints. So most of the investigators that I've worked with have said I'm not a writer. As a matter of fact, I taught first year composition for 20 years. I cannot tell you how many times I heard I'm not a writer. But look at everything that's been written that people have participated in to get to the point of publication. And I used to say, have you ever written an email? Have you ever written a text? Have you ever written a grocery list? Everybody's a writer. So at this point, you have documents galore. It's a matter of condensing them down and telling the story, because science is powerful, but so is narrative. So you're telling the story of the work that you've done in a way that's clear and compelling and gives other people an in to your work. And all members of the team have valuable insight to offer. So I remember a proposal I was working on one time, and the PI, it knew exactly what outcomes, exactly, what drugs he wanted to use, what he wanted to study. But the coordinator who was working with us on that project had we could not have done it without her, because she had invaluable insight as to how the process would actually work on the ground. All members of the team contribute to the draft of the proposal, and then ideally of the manuscript. I can tell you, Stephen writes a mean analytical method section. So if you are a novice, be not afraid. Because if your name goes on a publication, you have a stake in the quality of the outcome and you can contribute. So aside from that, medical writing itself and any kind of writing has a couple of benefits, right? I mean, it can be hard, sure. But the benefits are that you're building a track record of publication, and that the process of writing makes you a better scientist. So E.M. Forster, the novelist, once said, "How can I tell what I think till I see what I say?" And that's the first point there. Just engaging in that process of looking at things over and over helps you put your ideas in a more coherent format, much less putting something down on paper. And you can improve the sequential structure of the document that you're writing by going back to it. And then you also improve the logic of your thinking, because once it's down on paper, it's no longer kind of floating around in your head. You can evaluate whether the words that you're using are expressing the concept in your head. And that's what you want to align. The words on the page express the concept in your head. So writing and rewriting means that you're thinking and rethinking, that you're making your ideas more clear with each cycle. I hear music. So there's a common structure to these articles. I'm sure you've read dozens, if not hundreds of them. We call it the IMRAD format: introduction, materials and methods, results, and discussion. So it's the basic structure of a scientific paper. The most important thing, get started. Put in what you know, put in placeholders for what you don't. So an introduction, you explain what you wanted to do and why. Situate the work within the context of other works that's been done. And remember that it's not a comprehensive review of literature. You don't have to tell them everything you know, unless it's a comprehensive review of literature, and you tell them everything you know, right? But that you're citing the work that you looked at that gave you the ideas and led to the work that you're going to do. This is not the PowerPoint that I sent in. So now I really am just going to go off script, right? So you're talking about a narrative movement from the known to the unknown, from the background and the problem to the objective. The introduction features that narrative movement. Maybe it's the next one. There we go. I just put in an extra one. So introductions often require the most thought because the sections are so interrelated, and you're trying to give the reader everything that they need to know, to understand everything that comes after: your methodology, your results, and the discussion of the importance, right? So enough background that leads to the problem, shows the gaps in the current knowledge, and provides the information. So the way you frame the problem should lead to the research question, and then make your methodology seem the best method of addressing that research question. So here's an example. If the background is an HIV cluster centered on people who inject drugs in Austin, Indiana, which you may remember we had a few years ago, right up the highway in Austin, and HIV testing is limited in that population, and there are a number of reasons that it actually is. So the problem is that people don't know their HIV status, and they don't want to access testing at a health department, again, for various reasons. Right? Then the two-part research question is, first, would people use self-test kits if they were provided? Would that solve the problems that keep them from testing in a health department? And second, would the knowledge of their HIV status modify their behavior and enable them to lower their risk profile? So you're moving from the known, we have this HIV cluster, to the unknown. Would this intervention be effective in stopping it? So this is a way of evaluating what you write. And there are a bunch of these questions. You'll get them in the PowerPoint. They're framed here as yes or no questions. Example, does the review of the field of research build a logical case for the problem statement? Obviously, the answer is more than just yes. Make sure you can point in the document to the place where you do that. And then the other thing you can do is set this up and rate it. All right, so here's where I build the logical case for the study question. How well do I do it? And you can use any scale you want. Right? If the criteria is articulated, it can go anywhere from poorly articulated to somewhat poorly articulated to well articulated to very well articulated. Unclear, somewhat unclear, clear, crystal clear. It doesn't matter what criteria you use, but it's a way for you to evaluate your work. So materials and methods. Again, this is a lot of information. This is generally drawn from your protocol, and or the proposal often. And instead of being framed persuasively, it's an explanation. So the only reason we provide you this outline is because it's the most common method of organizing the work, and it's a good start. Excuse me, good starting place. More questions? Again, you're not just answering yes, you're making the case for each element. It's similar to the proposal, except now the purpose, rather than persuading someone to fund you, is enabling other scientists and other researchers or clinicians to evaluate your work. It's important at this point to weigh how extensively you need to address something. So, for example, if more than one research design might have been appropriate to answer the question, one of the things the reader might ask is, well, why did you choose the one that you did? And so you'll want to explain that. Moving on to the results. If you've got multiple outcome variables or you're addressing multiple components, the organization can get difficult here. So make yourself an outline. General outline can help you maintain consistency between sections, because as you'll hear in a second, generally the results and the discussion should address the same material in the same order. So here's another one. Simple way of stating it. Each result should have a method and each method should have a result. There's another trick that I often use called a reverse outline. Similar to what I said before about highlighting the topic sentence in each paragraph. I'll highlight the sentence in each section, and then if what I've actually written doesn't follow the same order, I can just move things around based on those highlighted sentences. So when you're talking about your results, different ways to convey the information are obviously text, which is the main way, but tables, figures, and statistics are other things that you'll use. It may be formulas or other figures. In the case of the results section, you're only presenting what you found. You're not yet explaining what it means. But the only thing I'll say about things like tables and figures is, first of all, use them sparingly. So I guess it's two things, part A and part B. And second, make sure that when you use them, they save you some text, because if there's a word limit, if you can convey something in a figure that it would take you 250 or 300 words to convey in text, you can use that text to explain things in the rest of your document. It's easy to overwrite. It's also easy to underwrite. So just remember, readers need sufficient detail to understand your work, but they don't need to know everything that you know. It's often useful after you've developed an initial draft and passed it among your team to have a second set of eyes from outside the team, or if it's just you and your team, to come back to it fresh, set it down for a couple of days so you can see it from a new perspective. So the discussion is where you actually interpret the data. Again, an outline, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because you'll have it in front of you, but this is the common order of presenting the data. Remember, topic sentences, one per paragraph, right, for the purpose of walking the reader through the steps you took and through the logic of your interpretation. And the most important tool for this section is the transition. All a transition is a word that indicates logical relationship. So if you want to indicate contrast, you can use but, however, nevertheless. You want to indicate addition, you can use and, furthermore, or one of my favorites, moreover. I don't know why I like that one. If you're stuck getting started, an easy way to get started is just answer these questions. Worry about style later, but this will get the material down on the page so that you can evaluate it and rewrite it. Here's another occasion where you can identify the sections of text where you've done these things. Right? Remember that every study has limitations. So it's important to acknowledge the limitations of your own work. It's part of scientific rigor. The nice thing about that is you're also setting yourself up on it goes. Start wherever you need to. This is often the easiest order because materials and methods you already have in the protocol and in the proposal. The results you've already distributed amongst your team in a report. The most important thing is starting. So I want to quote 3 of my favorite feminist science fiction writers about that. Margaret Atwood, who said, if I waited for perfection, I would never write a word. Octavia Butler, who said, you don't start out writing good stuff, you start out writing crap and thinking it's good stuff, and then gradually you get better at it. And C.J. Sherry, who said, it's perfectly okay to write garbage as long as you edit brilliantly. So once you've got text, you want to make sure that you review it and craft it. And remember, you're a writer. It's not a talent, it's not somebody coming in from on high. It's a craft that you can improve. So I want to quote William S. Burroughs at this point. He said, cheat your landlord if you can, but do not try and shortchange the muse. It cannot be done. You can't fake quality any more than you can fake a good meal. So quality only comes from practicing the craft and writing and revising. So numbers 2 and 3 are actually so important here that I'd like to call your attention to them. Appropriate vocabulary shows that you know the way people talk in your discipline. Right? In the study of composition, there's actually even a name for it. I won't bore you with it, but you want to talk like the people who talk in your discipline, and not just copying the language, but using it in a way that shows you know what it means. When I say just copying the language, that speaks to that third one. Simple ideas dressed up in complicated language. Use the technical terms if they're necessary, right? Technical terms are a form of shorthand that keeps you from having to give a long explanation for something every time you refer to it. But jargon actually makes your work harder to follow. It also ends up giving the impression that you lack confidence when what you're doing is trying to complicate a relatively simple concept with impressive language. So I guess both presentations can be boiled down to keep it simple, right? So good titles. Titles are important because your title is your first impression. Good title helps the reader decide whether they even want to click through to the abstract sometimes. And if your reader wants to cite you, often they will have a bibliography of dozens or hundreds of entries, and a good title enables them to find your work out of that bibliography. I will say that last one there, avoids humor, that hurts for some of us. It's a best practice. But fortunately, you can use humor in a PowerPoint. So not that I've done any of that. So writing in groups, because science now is team science, you're often writing in a group. As I said, Stephen writes in mean statistical methods section. And as a proposal writer, I know a little bit about each of these areas, and the experts are the ones who give me a lot of the text, right? So then we get together and we write and we rewrite. And you've seen this before. It leads to publication eventually. But if I can give you any comfort, let me give you the words of James Michener, who said, I'm not a very good writer, but I'm an excellent rewriter. That's why I love writing. That's why it's my happy place. Because I am a firm believer in second chances. So usually you write the abstract last because you are summarizing what you've actually done. It's a summary of the entire paper in 250 to 350 words. These are the questions that it answers. That last one, so what and who cares, are the most important. So 5A, so what? Well, I mean, it's your baby. I love that. I thought about sneaking in and retitling this whole presentation, Dressing Up Your Baby. But you know why what you're doing is important. So the only thing you need to do is convey that to the reader, right? And then the who cares is the implications of your results, either for subsequent science or clinical practice or whatever it is that you're looking at. Dr. Ramirez covered this really well. He actually gave me this slide so that we get to have the gradual reveal. I'm going to summarize it by saying, trust the process, right? Getting all of this done, and this is true of research in general, but particularly true of writing, getting all of this done takes as long as it takes. Have patience with yourself and have patience with your team members. So if you're discouraged, just think, I haven't failed. I just haven't succeeded yet. So these three things reinforce each other. The more you work on your logic, the more precise your idea is going to be. The simpler it is, the better you're able to convey the logic, and often the more precise that it is. So a good article, a good abstract, it's all good proposal. They're brief and they're clear. You always got to quote Twain, right? I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. Hard writing makes for easy reading. So we're back to the planning, the doing, the analyzing, and the publishing. A clinical study isn't completed until the results are published. This is something Dr. Ramirez says all the time that I firmly believe. I think it's absolutely true, because why do the science unless you want to bring it out into the world? And if people don't like your baby, that's their problem, right? They can come in after you and make their own baby. But that's the way it works, right? It's a conversation. In grant competitions, in other venues, investigators are often measured by their publications. And that's not always quantity. Often it's a few quality publications will make your reputation. And finally, and this is true to a certain extent, without prior publications, there's no grant. There are mechanisms for early investigators, so don't get discouraged if you don't have a publication record. This is a thing called the research pipeline. If research is your thing, if you want to pursue it, there is a pipeline that you enter, and it's a well-defined path to get to independence. So this takes us all the way back to the beginning. So now you're ready for the next project. You're ready to start planning again. So after you finish the publication, celebrate, pat yourself on the back, take a refreshing break, go out for a few drinks with your team members, and then dive back in. So we're going to take, I think, a couple of minutes to move the podium, and then it will be time for questions and answers. Thank you.